Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, hi, I'm Debbie and I make art videos. So I've been doing a lot of ink drawing lately and I wanted to do something with that artwork, and the other day I was in Michael's with my husband and I picked up some heat transfer vinyl. So I've never worked with this stuff. We're going to give it a go and get a little crafty with our artwork. Let's jump into it. I started off this project by scanning my artwork, and I used a nice selection of art reference books to keep my sketchbook in place. I had a couple of pages to choose from. One was kind of like these ghouly zombies, and then the other one had a mixture of zombies and vampires. And I knew I wasn't going to do the entire page, but I wanted to use one of the images on there. And in the end, I decided that the top left-hand corner of both of the pages were probably the easiest to translate, because it had the least kind of little scratchy marks, you know, because that was something that I knew would be quite time consuming to do and perhaps very hard. From there, I moved on to cleaning up the image in Photoshop. You could do this in other programs, but Photoshop is the one I'm familiar with, so I'll let you know what I did in there. Since my pencil lines were in a magenta color, I could easily remove them by going to Image and Adjustments and then converting it into a black and white image, and then color channels will open up and I can remove the magenta color. So if you work in a colored pencil, that makes it very easy to remove your colored pencil lines. This step takes a little bit of tweaking, and it might be different for your software that you're using, but I'll go through the steps really quickly of what I did. So I converted the image to black and white, I sharpened the image, and then I selected the color range of white and removed the white, so I deleted it. And then I saved it without a background as a PNG. So at the end, you'll have a transparent black PNG, and that's what you need to get started. Once I had a clean image, I realized that my image was a little off balance, so I decided to make sort of like a branding logo that was my initials, just to add to the corner and to the back of the shirt, which I'll show you later. But I think that's a nice kind of little detail that, first of all, if you want to do a branding thing, looks great, and it also is very graphic, so it can be part of the design, really. I then had to go through the whole scanning process with that little logo, but I think it was worth it. And what I am using today is the Sizer Easy Weed Eco Stretch and the Bella and Canvas crew neck t-shirt. This is a ladies large, and it is kind of a lime green color. I have a silhouette cutting machine, so your cutter might be different, but I am using the Silhouette Studio to do this. And I sized the image to the size that I wanted, and I used the trace tool to get the cut lines. And after that, you don't need your image anymore, so discard it. But the most important thing is mirror your image, flip it horizontally. I highly recommend checking the recommended cutter settings for the vinyl that you're using, because they can vary greatly. So I found mine out, and then I set up to do a test piece with the little logo that I had made, and I'm really glad I did that first, just to check the cut line depth for weeding. For those of you unfamiliar with working with vinyl, weeding is the process of removing the vinyl that you don't want to transfer, because you only want the image that you're transferring to stay attached to the plastic film, which will be revealed here in a minute. You can buy weeding tools from all craft stores and maybe even some art supply stores, or you can order them online. I have a stash of sculpting tools, and I'm like, that's pretty much what a weeder looks like, so I'm using some sculpting tools to do my weeding. A little note here is that the film that the vinyl is sticking to is adhesive, so it's quite sticky, so keep that in mind while you're working, because it'll stick to your hands. I was really glad that I did this little test, and even if you're not making a logo, it'd be good to do just a little test image, just to make sure that you have the right settings on before you go for the full thing. And then came in the moment of truth to send the image through the little robot and get it to do its thing. I like to stay close by if I'm doing something like this because, you know, these machines can be finicky, and if something gets jammed and you can catch it in time, sometimes you can save it. So it's totally worth sticking around and making sure that everything works out. I knew the weeding was going to take me a while, and it's not something I particularly love doing, so I started. But then I quickly realized that the image was quite complicated, and I printed out a reversed version of the image in Photoshop so that I could put it near my desk and have it as a reference so I wouldn't get lost. And if you have a complicated image, I would recommend you do the same thing. I initially started removing the perimeter the same way that I did with the little test piece, but I realized that was going to make my life more difficult. So I'd recommend with larger images to leave that for the end. So here's a list of things that I learned while doing my little weeding project. So first of all, I used the weeder, and I actually used two tools, and one of them had like a blunt edge, and I found this very helpful. I also had a pair of tweezers and a pair of scissors. I wish I had a small pair of scissors because that would have made getting into smaller places easier. And like I mentioned before, leaving the large perimeter area till the end is really handy. And make sure you check your image and flip it to make sure you haven't missed anything. Another thing I would like to mention is that weeding is quite time consuming. So find a podcast, find a YouTube video, be patient, because unlike regular vinyl, heat transfer vinyl is really stretchy and you can really disfigure the vinyl if you move too quickly. So take your time. It's going to take a while. Settle in. I just wanted to show you how I ended up using the tools. It's sort of like a way to pull things out and make sure I manage the edges while I did that, if you can tell that here in this little clip. And also I used the blunt edge tool to pat down the edges of things that I might have pulled up so that I didn't damage it with a sharper edge, and just kind of pat down those little things that lifted while I was pulling. And I found this a very helpful thing, so keep that in mind. Maybe you have something similar that you can work with, or maybe the tweezers works better for you, but I really found it helpful to have two weeding tools at hand. It took me several hours to do this, and the face of this last zombie was actually very confusing. So next time I will do a much simpler image, and keep that in mind that the more complicated the image, the more confusing the weeding will be. So do yourself a favor, use thicker lines. I would definitely use thicker lines next time, and do a bit more of a simpler image for this transfer technique in particular. The thing about this heat transfer vinyl is that it is compatible with a home iron, and so I just set up on a kitchen table, and I would recommend that you put a towel down to make sure that you don't get your shirt dirty. A table height is optimal, I think, because you need to use your body pressure to actually do the transfer. And while I heated up my iron, I grabbed some parchment paper. I've seen other people do this. I don't know if it's necessary, but I'd rather not get plastic stuck to my iron. So I cut off a little piece for my test corner, and check how much time is required for your particular vinyl. For mine, it was about 30 seconds, so I held firmly on, and I got a great transfer with that. And once I was convinced this really worked, I could move to the front of the shirt, the main deal here. Now, I've noticed some people use a template to see where you would want to space the image that you're transferring over, but I looked at some of my own graphic tees and I noticed it was about a hand width apart, so I grabbed a little notebook that was about that distance, and I kind of eyeballed it, to tell you the truth. But you can make a stencil for yourself if you want to get an exact distance for yourself. And once I was convinced I had it in the right spot, I pressed firmly down on the adhesive, and that's when I noticed I had forgotten a little piece. So I did have to curl up the corner and do a little weeding on the spot. So make sure you take a really good look before you put it down, because this was awkward. So the one tip that I got from other channels that were doing transfer vinyl was to not
use stroking motions with your iron, but instead just press firmly and hold, and use your body weight for that, because it's sort of like your body weight is the press. So just take your time, press and hold and press and hold, and get your way through the image. Although I was eager to see if it had worked, I did wait for the film to cool down before I started to lift my image back. And then I did this very slowly and carefully because I wanted to keep an eye on the transfer and make sure everything had transferred over to the t-shirt and wasn't rolling up. I didn't really have any problems except for the 1M was not fully adhered. So I did end up going back with the parchment paper and the iron and just doing another little round, a little safety round. And then after a day and a half of work, my shirt was done. And what's left to do but try it on? So here it is on me. Fits great. I love it. I think that little detail on the back is really awesome, and I'd recommend it as a design option for you. And I really love my shirt.
So thanks for watching to the end, everyone, and I hope you found that useful if you were thinking about making a project like this yourself. I think it's a really good way to do a one-off for an event, like for me, I'm going to Comic-Con, or if you have a friend that you want to make a gift for. I think it'd be really awesome to turn, if you have a niece or a nephew or a kid of your own, and you want to make a gift with their own artwork, I think that would be really, really cool. Anyhow, if you have any tips and tricks on how to work with this kind of heat transfer vinyl, because this is my first time doing it, share it in the comment section below. And I'll see you all at the next one very soon. Bye now.
It's awesome.